Hey Aishu, how are you? Good to see you again. Let's just. Hi Daksha, is this your first time on our chat? Naila, what's up? Nice to see you here. How are you doing? Yes, you are Aishu. Thank you so much. Love you for doing that, for always being here regularly. And hopefully, we will take your questions today. I know there were a couple of questions from last time's chat that got left behind. So let's just wait for Diana to log in and then we can begin. I'm very excited about today's subject. But then I say that for every subject, so I guess um, nothing new. Just going to check where Diana is. Give me a second. Yeah, sorry about that. Hi Suvarna, how are you? What's up? Karishma, nice to see you here. Hi Rajesh. Let's just wait for Diana. Nisha, Vijay. There she is. Yeah, let's add her. Waiting for Diana to log in. Hello.
Hello,
How
good
are
to
you?
be back.
Good to
How
be
are
back.
you?
Good.
How are you, darling?
Good evening to everyone. Welcome back to Decoding Life with Aanchal. Let's do an intro for Diana, though now she no longer needs intro on this page because she's pretty much a part of the page now. However, she's a therapist. She uses trauma-informed approach for healing her clients. Also a very, very dear friend of mine. Has immense knowledge of all the subjects that she talks about. And Diana was with us here on Tuesday, and we had a very, very interesting chat about childhood traumas and how they affect our adult lives. Today we're discussing addictions, and we're also going to do a little bit of a spillover from last time's chat, Diana. If there's anything people still wanted to ask, I remember.
Absolutely, absolutely. All questions, any questions are welcome, whether it's about last
Yeah.
time's or today. It's
So let's dive right in, Dee. We are talking today about a very important subject, addictions, and I've
correct.
actually been to do this for a very long time
Okay,
because it's the need of the hour. And given the way our environment is these days, given how people get
absolutely.
so stuck and how they take to a lot of external factors to
Correct,
join. So tell us
absolutely.
what really happens when what brings upon our addictions to either, and we're talking about all kinds of addictions, right? We're talking
Yeah,
about
absolutely. I mean, I'll
about
let you clarify that point.
food, shopping, sex,
Yes,
and all kinds of addictions. So
yes,
tell us what
absolutely.
triggers our desire for addictions. How does
You
this
know,
begin?
so okay, so let me just get to what I think addiction is, okay, just
Yeah,
to clarify, because it's not only about drugs, and people tend to associate when we say addiction, they tend to think it's alcohol or drugs, okay.
right.
So in my talk today, I'm basically going to reference the work of a Dr. Gabor Mate. He is like a
Okay.
pioneer. He's worked with addicts for over 30 years, and he's come up with
Okay.
some fantastic and brilliant insights into how to deal with addiction and put a whole new spin on it
Okay.
for the community. Basically, he says that addiction is like the end point in a process that is infused by suffering and pain. Okay, addiction essentially refers to any behavior with negative consequences, but
Mm-hmm.
which the person who's addicted cannot stop. He keeps
Okay.
craving it, and he does not know how to stop that behavior. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, from that perspective, there are many different types of addictions in our culture.
Correct.
We have addictions to,
Correct.
like you said, it's not just about drugs and alcohol. Now,
Yeah.
for example, the shopaholic and the workaholic, through their
Yeah.
addiction,
Yes. Yes.
they're both trying to release the same chemicals in the brain as a drug addict is. The only difference is in how they're doing it. So, for example, and an addict will be a drug addict will be using cocaine, but
Right.
a shopaholic will be spending money and buying things he doesn't need. So,
Right.
in that process, the addiction process in that sense is essentially the same. There's
Right.
no real difference there.
The desire you mean is the same. Dee, I'm going to pause you once again. Anoki darling, and I know this, even my cousin asked me this. So just hold your questions till the end. We'll come to this. I know that, phone addictions are also a big thing with teenagers. But we'll come to questions at the end of the chat. I don't want to interrupt Dee while she's talking about what she.
Okay.
Um,
Sorry,
so
you were
yeah,
saying.
so this
I
is
mean,
you're saying our need for this is what this is how it comes up.
Well, it's basically you're using different, you're finding different ways
Yes.
to, but for a similar reason, so to speak. It's just different avenues, all with the same reason in mind, which we'll get to when I try and explain why people get addicted.
Right.
Why people get addicted, why they do what they do in an addicted pattern.
Right.
So,
yeah, I thought you were going to say something else.
Sorry. So essentially, people get hooked on to things that are not necessarily good for them in an effort to regulate. Okay, you're trying to regulate your emotional state, your feeling state. You're trying to feel something that you've been wanting to feel for a long time, but are not able to achieve that state on your own. For example, confidence, self-acceptance, an ability to feel stress relief. These are all states that, this is called emotional regulation. A lot of people cannot achieve that in and of themselves. So they need different ways to sort of regulate.
But tell me something, does this only get triggered emotionally, or is there also a chemical imbalance or a genetic imbalance because of which addictions get triggered?
You know, of course, there's a whole, it's definitely, well, we'll get to that in a minute. Sorry, what I wanted to point out was that addiction, like we said before, can be to a host of different substances. It's addiction to shopping, to gambling, to food, to toxic relationships, to drama, to prescription medications, illicit drugs. You know, so the sad thing is, in our society, that drug addiction is very stigmatized. People look down upon drug addicts when actually, more than 5 million people die globally from tobacco consumption, and tobacco consumption is legal. Do you know what I mean? But because drug addiction has a criminal aspect to it, it's negatively labeled.
Right.
So coming back to your question about whether it's genetic, there's been a lot of research conducted on trying to isolate a single gene that's responsible for addiction, but it hasn't been found yet. Okay. Anyways, genes, they've realized, are turned on and off by our environment. What they did find, however, is that stressed out pregnant moms, have a higher chance of having children who are more likely to become addicts later on in life. Now there was a study conducted in California a couple of years ago called the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. They took 17,000 adults and they were given a checklist, and the checklist contained items related to negative childhood events like trauma, neglect, abandonment, physical abuse, sexual abuse. People who ticked off more than 5 of those items had a 4,600% higher risk of developing addictions compared to those that didn't. And the reason for this is, like we mentioned in the last chat, that brain development begins in the uterus. It begins in the womb, right? And the brain structures, the chemicals, the neurotransmitters in people with stressful early experiences don't develop properly. They don't develop properly, and then it leads to chronic emotional pain, long-term emotional pain, which then the drugs tend to soothe. It's almost like self-medicating, taking drugs. And this is drug of choice. Your drug of choice could be shopping. Your drug of choice could be gambling, right? So it basically becomes like, again, it's a way to regulate. It's a way to feel better, So it's very interesting. It's very fascinating that they say drug addiction generally begins in adolescence. It begins in your teenage years. And when they first do the drug, when they first get their hit, they feel so euphoric. They feel happy. They feel confident. And it's something they've never felt before. They feel loved. They feel love. And they're blown away by it. It's almost like wow, this is, it's crazy. It's almost like filling an emptiness inside. It's filling an emptiness inside. But you know what's really interesting is that the drug is not addictive in and of itself. So for example, if I see a pack of cards, I don't become a gambler. Or if I eat food, I don't become a food addict, right? There is some predisposition in there. Sorry, come again?
Feeling that you develop, that you associate with
exactly. But The point is that, it's the predisposition is early stress. It is early stress,
Correct.
and that kind of predisposes you to that.
Correct. So, I just remember an experience, a conversation with a friend, and, she was telling me my husband and I had this major fight once. And, I just decided to go to Palladium and, you know, shop it up. And he apparently
That's a
calls
nice
her
way to punish the husband.
up
That's a nice way to punish the husband.
and tells her that, babe, I think we're being robbed. And she goes like, no, darling, you're being robbed.
Yeah,
So what I'm trying to say is that, again, this is very clearly a reaction to a situation, to a fight, to an argument. And clearly there's something there that doesn't add up in terms of dealing with your relationship the way you should deal with it, which is triggering you to go and vent it out in another format, is it not? I mean, is
absolutely. I mean, it depends. It again depends upon the degree of the addiction. Like, not a person who's a shopaholic will be shopping whether or not they fought with their husband. It's just a way of feeling, feeling regulated, so to speak.
correct.
And there's
Right,
others who shop just to, tick off the husband with their credit card or
right,
whatever. That's just
right,
that's probably reactionary. It's not necessarily coming down to an addiction.
right. So now tell me of all and obviously, certain addictions are far more dangerous, so to say, health wise than others, okay, maybe shopping and eating, maybe an overweight problem or whatever, but alcohol, drugs, these smoking, these are very detrimental to health. So when one is already addicted and that, you want to break away from this, you want to get help, how easy is it for people to really how easy is it for people to break away and get help, and how easy is it to do it via therapy rather than medication, and what is the veracity of medication in getting help? People say you get addicted even to those anxiety drugs and those pills that actually calm.
Absolutely. Yeah,
So
absolutely.
is this like a vicious circle?
Let's look at, I don't want the forum to fall asleep on me, so please everybody stay with me for a few minutes. It's going to get a little bit technical as I trying to explain what happens in the brain when you get addicted. Okay, so like we spoke about brain development occurring early in life. So
Right,
a circuitries form in the brain based on your environment, right? Now
right.
the development of the circuits depend directly on the amount of stimulation you're getting from your life, from your environment. So I'll give
Okay,
you an example. We have a visual circuit that develops that helps us to see. If a
okay.
child doesn't see daylight for the first 4 or 5 years of his life, the brain kills
Yeah.
that circuit and says, I don't need it. So the child will never see again. Okay?
Okay.
So, by that same measure, the brain needs a certain amount of stimulation from the environment to develop circuits. Now, there are four circuits that are responsible in addictions. Okay? One is the opiate circuits. Opiates are like morphine and heroin, and we also produce our own opiates called endorphins in the brain. They're natural
Right.
painkillers. The
Right.
second circuit is the dopamine circuit, and dopamine is a neurotransmitter. It's a chemical that's released when it basically makes us curious about the world, makes us motivated to go out and do stuff. It's a
Right.
reward neurotransmitter, and it's really important because whenever we indulge in our drug of choice, whether it's caffeine, whether it's shopping, whether it's sex, whether it's drugs, whatever it is, we get a hit of dopamine. Okay,
Correct.
and that kind of gets our attention, so that's an addictive pattern as well. The third
Right.
circuit is impulse control. Like, addicts cannot say no. The brain of an addict cannot say no because the part of the brain that tells you right from wrong is sort of impaired. It's not developed properly, so they have problems with
Okay.
that. And then they have problems with
Okay.
stress regulation. They can't regulate stress. So they need the
Okay.
substance, the drug of choice, to feel a certain way. Now, coming back to your
Right.
point, therapy definitely works. I mean, it depends upon every addict will go through some sort of withdrawal when they get off the drug.
Sorry.
You know,
Yeah.
even if the
Yeah.
drug is a toxic relationship or the drug is shopping, when they stop doing it, they're going to experience a low. They're going to hit a low until the brain can come around, go through the withdrawal, and then, with therapy,
Right.
with medication, with the right
Right.
supervision and right professional help,
Right.
come around again. But it
Yeah.
takes a little bit of time and a lot of patience. And there's a lot of irritability in the addict. There's a lot of their support system has to be strong. There's people around them who probably can't stand them during that time. It's a difficult
Right.
process. It's a
Right.
difficult process.
Right. At what point do we accept and understand that we're addicted? At what is that breaking point? What is that tipping point? How do we know that we've had one too many drinks, had, one too many coffees, one too
Yeah,
many, how do you differentiate?
I
Even
think
sex, right? You just have a
correct.
high libido, are actually addicted, so how, in all these different ways, where does one
How do you know?
understand?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, you essentially know when you can't do without it, and you
Okay.
can't say no to it, or
Okay.
when you need it to feel a certain way. When you need
Understood.
it to feel a certain way, that you can't get to that space by yourself without the substance or without the drug of choice, then it's kind of, there's a dependence being created there. There's some sort of dependency being created there.
Right, right, right. Very interesting. So, we've spoken about how we need certain substances, external situations to make us feel better about
Yeah.
things. Do you also feel the reverse applies? Like, I very often, I've seen people go through addictions, and I've seen that they need to feel like it's like a pity party. You need to feel sorry for yourself. You need to feel like something off in your life to justify drinking or smoking or whatever, because otherwise, what other reason? If you're happy and you're content in your life or whatever, there's no other reason to go and explanation to say that, okay, I need my drink today. So do you think that
Correct.
also applies? uh,
I can't generalize and say it applies to everybody, but I think once you're addicted and you don't want to get off the drug of choice, then it becomes, then anything you'll do anything to get it. So whether it's making yourself a victim, whether it's getting angry at people, whether it's lashing out, a
right.
lot of addicts have a lot of shame, and a lot of them have very high levels of antisocial behaviors.
Okay.
So, it's anything to get the drug. I mean, the entire life, at one point in a severe case, the entire life becomes about that.
Right.
It's all focused around getting the hit.
Of stress in your head and creating situations of stress that justify you reaching out for that next smoke or the next drink, or whatever it is that people feel that they're addicted to.
I mean, it could work both ways. It could work
Okay.
both ways. It could be an external event that's creating the need or the drive for the drug. It could be, like you said,
Right.
something that you're making up in your head just so you can get the hit. But the end result
Right.
is the brain needs the hit, because the
Right.
brain of an addict is constantly craving that feeling, that release from stress.
Right.
The kind of solace. Okay, I got my hit now. I'm fine. I feel better. I feel okay.
Right.
So
Right.
it's not able to sort of do without it.
Right. And what happens after? So, I've also been in the presence of friends. I don't know how I managed to land myself in such situations, who've been consuming coke, and I've seen, and I was exposed to this situation once where there was a very volatile fight at one point because of consumption with a friend or a sibling. And then after a couple of hours, there's a complete slump, and you're just crying away, and you're just like depressed, and you're feeling completely low. How do people like this really break this pattern? uh, what do you do? It's easy to say, I need help, I need to break this. How do you actually overcome it?
It comes down to, it's not about why the addiction, it's more why the pain.
Okay.
Addiction is a symptom. Addiction is a
Right.
symptom, it's not the cause. So
Right.
if addiction is a symptom, then what is the cause? The cause is the underlying pain. Why is this
Right.
person not able to regulate? Why is this person need the drug to feel a certain way about themselves?
Right.
Because a
Right.
lot of people use not just to emotionally regulate, but also as a coping mechanism, as a mechanism to escape certain negative feeling states.
Right.
So
Right.
it's all tied into that. I think that the at the crust of it is why the pain, not the addiction.
Right.
That is important. It's
I think I also went through a phase when I was overworking out,
okay.
and
That
really
that's
put.
a, that's a that, that's an addiction. That can be an
That's
addiction.
what I really thought at some point, that it was my way of, I don't know, either relieving stress, or, maybe not being okay with the way I appear, or I don't know. So I think that was also one. So there are, I guess that every form of addiction that you have, there is some triggering factor behind it and a different
100%.
emotional factor.
100%. 100%. We
So,
all have a drug of choice. We all have a drug of
right,
choice. And it doesn't have to be something that's necessarily life threatening or harmful for you. Like you said, in your
right,
case, it could be
right,
just working out, you know.
right,
But it
right,
still begins somewhere. Like you said, you kind of were aware that you were getting sort of hooked on to working out and couldn't do without it, you know. So
right,
obviously it was doing something for you at a deeper level that you maybe
right.
couldn't do without the workout. That's not to say that workout is bad for you. Workout is fantastic for you. But where do you
Right.
draw the
So,
line? Where does it?
so can we attribute like different emotions to different kinds of addictions? Like, say, for example, overworking out, and a lot of people are obsessed with fitness and train for like 2 to 3 hours a day, even if they're not professionals. And I guess that somewhere comes from a lack of a good body image, or lack of confidence. Um, what about the other forms of addictions? Like, say, for example, shopping, for example, smoking, lighter versions, overeating. Let's not talk about only drugs and alcohol, but simpler versions that people don't necessarily know and are aware that they're addicted and they're hooked, but
Hmm.
subconsciously they're doing it. So for example, for shopping, where do you think that this triggers from? Like workaholic, someone's just put that down. Where does
Yeah.
that get? Do
Well, you know,
what,
workaholics. Being a workaholic is a high. Being a workaholic is a high. Achievement is a high. Success is a high. Money is a high. Power is a high. You know.
right,
But at what point? Why do you need that to feel okay about yourself? You know.
right, right,
It begs the question, right? Why do you need that to feel okay about yourself? Again, I'm not saying that being a workaholic is a good or bad thing. There's no judgment
correct,
here. But
correct.
people also know that being a workaholic can take away attention and time from very other important parts of your life.
Your
So
life.
so a workaholic will know that he's hooked.
Yeah, or you're running away from those parts of your life which you don't want to face, right?
Exactly. You're
Right,
either trying to regulate or you're trying to just block out everything else and focus only on one thing. But then
right,
what when you hit 70 and 80 and you can't work anymore? Then it all
correct,
comes back to
correct.
face you. You know, it's all right behind you.
Correct. Someone brought up also a very important point that says people, that's also a very interesting thing. A lot of people are very concerned about what other people think about them. And I guess that also may be coming from some childhood traumas, maybe. I don't know.
In the
You know,
sense, can you elaborate?
not being cared for enough, being a people pleaser.
Oh
Where do you,
yes, oh, people pleaser, absolutely. People pleaser is probably, trying to get people to validate you because you can't self-validate. You don't
right,
feel good enough about yourself, so a person's opinion sort of then begins to define you. I think a
right,
lot of that can come from childhood when parents didn't appropriately validate a child at the right times.
right.
People pleasing can be it can be quite addictive, like because your entire opinion about self is based on how others see you. You know,
Think about you. Also like appearances, right? The way you dress, the way you
absolutely,
present yourself. Some people
absolutely,
obsessed about the way they look,
no,
because
absolutely,
I guess a lot of confidence that comes from within. It just their confidence comes from the way they appear and what people think about them,
correct, correct.
which is
There's a
very
fine
dangerous.
line
It may,
between dressing up for yourself and dressing up for validation. You know, and most of us do it. It's not something that only addicts do, or all of us do
right,
that. We all want to look good, we want to feel good, we love to be
right,
complimented, but
right,
when you cross that line, when there's when
right,
that, yeah.
right.
So I mean,
There's one interesting question I do want to take right now, though. Kashyap says, "Can you define the sympathy or an addiction?" Okay, I don't know what this means. When one receives it because of anxiety or depression, I'm assuming that the sympathy that you receive
hmm.
when you're, is that also an? This is a very interesting question. How do you
Hmm.
explain this?
Well, I think that that there are a lot of people who are sort of programmed through life experience to play the
Ah,
victim. you know
okay,
you kind of become the victim because being the victim also gives you a lot in terms of validation, attention, nurturing, caring.
right,
People call to check on you, they come and
right,
spend time with you, they bring things
right,
for you. It can be a symptom of of loneliness, of not being, it's it depends. Again, it for the most part, people who play the victim all the time are looking
Yeah.
to like just have people tell them, oh, poor you, poor you, poor you, and
Right.
it is an attempt to escape a certain amount of responsibility for your own life and your
Correct.
own choices, and
Right.
things that you could possibly change for yourself. But sometimes it's a symptom of just wanting to be cared for in a certain way.
Right. Right. And how is depression connected to addictions? Like, what does the role
Well,
of
we see a lot of addicts who go into depression when the drug of choice is taken away. So,
Okay.
for example, if you're in a toxic relationship for a prolonged period of time, and it's addictive because it releases the same chemicals in your brain as cocaine, for example, right? So
Right.
it's an up and down. It's a good day, bad day. It's very addictive. The cycle of up and down is very addictive. There's no stability there. When you
Right.
get out of the relationship, say you're lucky enough to get out of that relationship, you experience a low, because suddenly it's boom, it's like this big void in your
Right.
life, and you don't
Right.
understand how to fill it, and your body, your brain, and your system actually somewhere will crave the drama, it craves the chaos, it craves the madness. And
Right.
if you're not aware, you'll mistake it with wanting the relationship back or wanting the person back, which can be quite harmful in many ways.
So this is actually a very interesting point that you've touched upon, relationships and relationship patterns and how you
Yeah,
can be a certain personality and a certain kind of person.
yeah.
Let's talk a little bit more about this. How does addiction play a role? How do we find ourselves being attracted to the same personality and not learning our lessons? How does this pan out?
This touches on a little bit of a different topic, somewhere more connected to what we spoke last time about how we generally tend to pick partners, and how
Okay.
we're drawn to certain types of people based on what we've grown up around.
Right.
Like I said, addiction to relationships, addiction to toxicity is not very well known, but it's very relevant, because if you
Okay.
experience the same emotional states, negative or positive, through a
Right.
relationship, especially a relationship that's not very stable and that's
Right.
not very, that has too much of it's a roller coaster ride almost.
Yeah.
When that happens, it's highly addictive. It's highly
Right.
addictive because sometimes you
Right.
have good days, you have bad days, you've got days where you don't understand what happened, you're left confused, you're left feeling less than, and your brain needs that. It's because at the end of the day, it's kind of like a hit. It's the hit of a drug. The drug being the relationship.
Right. Right.
So to get off that, there is also withdrawal in getting off a relationship, which people need to see. Like give yourselves a little bit of time to heal, because there is
Right.
withdrawal in the loss of a seemingly negative relationship as well, not just drugs and alcohol. So that's the
Right.
addiction.
So now, what would you advise to people who are addicted, who are looking to battle their addictions, to get out of it? They have the awareness that this is not good for them,
Yeah.
but they're not able to do what they need to do for themselves. What is your advice to them?
It's really important that we change our perception. We change from judgment to empathy. We stop
Right.
labeling addicts as, oh, addicts. That's
Very
really,
important
really,
point brought up is also judgment of people who
yeah,
are
we
addicted.
need to stop, because we
Yeah.
all have a drug of choice. We all have a
Right.
drug of choice. So who are we to judge anyways, right?
Right.
And I think
Right.
I think that, like, when we do that, we can approach it with more empathy and understanding.
Right. Yeah.
We because I mean, we can blame it on genes and say, okay, it can't be life experience, must be genes, because this guy's father was an addict, or this guy's grandfather was an addict. But
Right.
when we do
Right.
that, we
You're
bypass
labeling.
our yeah, no, we bypass our responsibility as a society in how we
Right.
treat each other, how we treat people who are suffering, how we raise our children, right?
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
bypass that responsibility, and in that process, we lose control. We lose control to actually make a difference, make a change. So I
Right.
think it's so important, because, like I said, addiction is a symptom, you know.
Right.
So this again begs the question: not why the addiction, but why the pain. So you're looking
Right.
at someone, you're looking at a supposed addict
Right.
with not eyes of judgment, but eyes of like, okay, maybe something happened to this person that I don't understand, that I don't know. Because why
Right.
would somebody continuously engage in something that's detrimental unless
Right.
it's doing something for them, unless it's
Right.
really, really doing something for them, which they can't do on their own. So we need
Right.
to, as a society, as a community, just keep a little bit of an open mind and,
Right.
not jump to the conclusion that because this person has abused whatever their drug of choice is, that there's something wrong with them. You know,
Right.
for all we know, they're just trying to feel okay about themselves in so many ways.
And
And I think,
how, go ahead, sorry.
no, sorry, take the floor.
Just what about people who are around loved ones of people who are, addicted? And I'm talking about certain extreme cases, extreme alcoholism, extreme drug consumption,
Yeah.
where it affects family lives, it affects loved ones. What would be your advice to these people, that uh, it's difficult. It's difficult for people around as well, right?
It's very, very difficult for people. It's a very hard space to be in. More so because family members sometimes don't know what to do, and rightly so, because we're not taught this stuff in school. So
Correct.
when you find somebody in your family who's going through something like this, you need to understand that they're in pain, that there's
Right.
something deeper. There's something deeper
Right.
that the addiction is covering. you know
Right.
I think that's really, really important, that they don't just jump to the conclusion that, oh god, my child is hooked on something and that means that this is
Right.
bad and I'm dead.
Right.
And it's also important to, to be there for that person and get the right kind of professional help involved.
Right.
We have counselors, we have therapists, we have support groups which people can turn to, where they don't feel isolated and alone and again judged. Most people are afraid to come out because of the judgment, especially in our country. I mean, it is still stigmatized. But I think
Yeah.
that if we
I
if
see.
we if yeah if the family just steps up and says, okay, we'll deal with this. Maybe it's sometimes addiction can be symptomatic of family dynamics. It's something
Correct.
that's happening
Correct.
within the family, like sexual abuse, which is a bit extreme, but there's a lot of children who go through stuff like that, and when they grow up
Right.
they find that the only way they feel okay about themselves is through addictions.
Right.
So it's very important for the family to come on board again with an open mind, without judgment, with a lot of empathy and understanding, and bringing the right help on board. That is, I cannot stress that enough, because nobody can do this in isolation. It is
Right.
always a team effort to help somebody who's struggling. You know.
Right. Right. There's also the whole addiction to pain, right? Like a lot of people who are obsessed
Oh,
about getting and
absolutely.
or inflicting
Self
physical
harm.
pain. And I guess what kind of emotions do you think are associated with that? Because people actually don't feel the pain, because
So,
it's their is this a way of suppressing emotional pain?
so a lot of self-harm, like cutting and hitting yourself or harming yourself physically, is it's like a release of emotional pain. It's a
Okay.
way to regulate. It's a way to
Right.
regulate, because people who
Right.
cut are in severe emotional pain. They don't want to feel it, and when they cut, the pain shifts to physical. The
Physical.
pain
Right.
shifts from emotional to physical.
Right.
So when
Right.
when that happens,
Right.
it is it's hard. It's a hard reality to come to terms with, that I'd rather feel physical pain of cutting myself than
Right.
be able to process my emotions. Again, goes to show how important emotional regulation is in all of this. Because if a person can regulate themselves, and not many people can. Those who can emotionally regulate will have a lesser tendency to go towards addictions, to go towards
Correct.
things that are not good for them, because they're
Correct.
able to achieve those feeling states on their own.
Correct. Correct. So now a lot of these addictions that we've discussed and we've spoken about is also like a lot of adult situations, right? What
Yes.
about most of drugs, alcohol, smoking? All this begins at a very early age, peer pressure,
Yes.
school, colleges, and I think it's a very real fear for parents today. Is when they're sending. I think when you and I grew up, times were simpler. We literally
Absolutely.
just
Absolutely. We didn't have this kind of
have
exposure.
anything. We would go down, play in the park at the most. A lot of family time. Sundays were with family. These days, the dynamics are so volatile. There's so much peer pressure in school. There's so much exposure. There's so much information available. How do for parents also, how are you able to protect children from this? How, and what is it that children at this age, what drives them to take up,
You
these
know,
addictions?
there's two things here. One is simple peer pressure to try something that's supposedly cool. One is that.
Correct.
The other
Correct.
is you are actually using to feel a certain way. Okay,
Correct.
so it goes way back. We're going way back again into development in the womb. You know, the presence of a nurturing, non-stressed mother
Right.
is so important because
Right.
the brain structures that we spoke about earlier that are responsible for later life addiction, those brain structures are formed properly or not based on the mother's emotional state, based on the
Right.
mother's attention to the child, okay,
Right.
and the quality of that attention, the quality of that bond. So if that bond is not the way it needs to be for those circuits to develop properly, then the
Right.
child does not have it in him to be able to say no to something that's not good for him
Right.
in the same capacity. So it's
Right.
extremely important. Again, it goes back to the womb, and then the human brain. We are the only species whose brain develops as rapidly outside the womb as
Correct.
in the womb, right? And those circuits are forming, like millions of circuits are forming, and those circuits are forming based on our environment, how we
Right.
perceive others around us, how we are perceiving our parents being towards us, towards each other. So
Right.
when that circuit is formed at its optimum level, there's a
Right.
much lower risk for that child to need
Yeah.
drugs to feel a certain way because they're
Correct.
already feeling a certain way, you know.
Correct.
So it I mean, there's no one fit formula. I can't say that it applies across the spectrum, but the
Right.
chances are definitely less if early development and early stress is sort of curtailed.
Controlled. Yeah. Okay.
Correct,
Okay.
correct.
I think we've crossed 30 minutes, but I'm going to leave the
Yeah.
forum open for questions now, because we sort of didn't take a lot of questions during our Tuesday chat.
Yes.
Uh,
Okay.
and while our viewers do that, I'm going to ask you one last question, is that, as apart from all of this, you know, um, early age, family environments or whatever, how do parents protect children from this peer pressure, just purely out of this thing, because I have a niece. I'm terrified every time she steps out, and when she started going to college, started using the local train. How do you and I know most parents want to give a very well balanced upbringing to their children, but it's very difficult to avoid peer pressure. What would be your advice to parents, and how can they protect their children from this?
Just raise them with self acceptance, raise them with a sense of self that's strong, that's grounded, that's just help them accept who they are, flaws and
Right.
all, because nobody's perfect. But and children have a way of looking to parents, like I said last time, to mirror their emotions back to them. So let
Right.
them know that nobody's perfect, and that's okay. Again, in
Correct.
disciplining styles with parents also plays a big role in this. Like parents who are physically abusive, verbally abusive, mentally abusive are not doing much good for their kids, because
Right.
kids internalize that and they make the problem about them, not about the parent, right? And all of this early stage stuff goes into the making of the child's self concept, the child's self esteem, how he
Right.
views himself in the context of his world. So it's
Right.
really, really important that, parents, obviously, like I said, they're all well meaning and they do the best they can. But if
Yeah.
parents instill a good, strong sense of self in the child and let
Yeah.
them know that the love for them is unconditional, like I said
Yeah.
last time, that certain
Yeah.
behaviors may not be acceptable, but that doesn't mean that I don't love you. I will still love you. That's
Correct.
unconditional. But certain behaviors are better than others.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the child has a strong foundation from which to explore his world, and he
Right.
knows that, okay, I'm loved. There's value in me. There's value in me.
Yeah.
And when a child goes out and if he experiments, he experiments. But if you have that instilled in your child,
That
there's a
anchor
less
for.
likelihood. Yeah, there's a less likelihood of him
Yeah.
getting addicted.
Yeah.
Of getting addicted. So it's quite interesting.
Very, very well put. I'm going to take this question. What happens when two children, for the sake of this example, twins, one develops with addictions and the other one without? how do we talk about family environment being responsible for addictions?
I
Sapna,
think
I
we
think
just
I answered. It's not
yeah, I think
necessarily a
we
family
just
environment. It's
yeah,
also a pressure, and we address that, so it's also, I think that I personally also believe that this is a very strong sense of grounding that you develop in your formative and your early years. And if you really
absolutely.
understand from an early age, because I've also seen parents over providing for children, and hence in this environment of excess, uh, when they are faced in life with adversity, or when they're faced in life with not being able to get what they
Yes,
want, but because early
absolutely.
has been about
Absolutely.
having everything at your disposal, they don't know how to deal with that,
Yes,
and then
correct.
unnecessary, and it trickles down in so many ways, extramarital affairs, overworking, so many ways. So I think that that's also like a very important factor, that being able to have a very grounded,
Temperate.
temperate, moderate
Absolutely.
upbringing, not
Correct.
necessarily
Absolutely.
a very
You have
affluent
to you
or
have to get 100%. If your child has a strong, good sense of self and
yeah.
knows what, just understands how it's all in the, I won't say it's in the upbringing, because everybody wants to bring up the child to the best of their ability,
All well.
but the more awareness we create about this, the better parenting skills can be, because there's always room for improvement anywhere, you know.
Right. Right. We have another question. It was mentioned that early stress from parents also affect the children who grow up, and if anxious,
Yes.
depressed, heavily dependent on that very stressed parent for. This question is half Kashyap.
Who is this? Kashyap. Okay, it was mentioned that
Then
early
I
stress from parents. So
find
I'll just quickly touch on Kashyap's.
I
Sorry,
think
go ahead.
what he's trying to get on is over dependence on a parent. Maybe that's
You
also a
mentioned
form of
that.
addiction.
So early, because addictive behaviors are based on brain development, and we spoke about that.
Yeah.
That early
Yeah.
development and is in the formative years, even in the womb,
Yeah.
sets the stage
Yeah.
for how those circuits form, right? And how those circuits form will determine how you interact with the world, how your perception of the world. So if you're he's mentioned in that, he said child is heavily dependent on a very stressed parent, like a
Turning
child
to
is turning to a stressed and fearful parent. Well, Kashyap, children pick up on the parents' fear and stress. In fact, there's been a very interesting, fascinating study that has shown that when women are pregnant and if they're very stressed, then the fetus in the womb picks up on that stress. It knows it's going to be born into a stressful environment, and it
right.
actually develops differently. So
Right.
they say a child will be born with stronger hands and feet and lesser
Right.
brain development, because it feels like it's going to be born into a flight environment.
Right.
That's how
Right.
intelligent the fetus is. The fetus picks up on the stress of the mother and
Right.
changes its form of development, because
Right.
its only main function is to survive, to keep the fetus alive, right? So
Right.
they're like, okay, you won't get the best amount of brain development if you're a very stressed out pregnant mom, because
Yeah.
that circuitry is forming more for the hands and feet to fight, rather than intelligence and IQ and all of that.
Yeah.
I hope
Yeah.
that answers his question.
And
Yeah.
I think also what you're trying to probably hint at is, from what I'm understanding, is also, certain parents, especially mothers, for whatever reasons in our earlier Indian societies, don't really have validations. A lot of people just stayed in marriages for the sake of staying in marriages,
Yes.
um, had difficult in-laws, had difficult
The
lives in
difficult
terms of
lives. Yeah,
finances or
absolutely.
whatever, very difficult lives. I think in very overbearing parents, especially in Indian societies, where a child is really made to feel that, oh, you can't do without us, you can't do without us,
Yes.
and a
Yes.
child becomes overly dependent on a parent, where
Correct.
parents are not willing to let their children be
Go.
and
Yeah.
tackle their issues, so it can also that, but
We tend to do what was done to us.
yeah,
Without awareness, we'll repeat what was done to us. And
correct,
again, it's nobody's fault. You can
yeah,
look at it physiologically and say that it's how the brain develops. So again, you're picking up behaviors from the environment. Picking up reactions from the environment. You're
right,
picking up all sorts of things, right? So and
right,
that becomes the foundation of your life. So
right,
we tend to do what was done to us for the most part without awareness. But like I said,
right,
this generation is quite aware. They are changing the landscape of parenting. They are changing the landscape of of how we function in the world. So
Right.
it's a very good thing, and the more that people are aware, the better they can do, the better parent they can be.
Right.
So
Wonderful. Had a very interesting chat, Dee, as usual. I
thank
think we
you.
on and on. Uh, we're going to
No,
leave
could
this
talk
at this.
about this forever. Yeah.
Diana, because her knowledge on every subject is immense. And if you guys have any topics that you particularly want us to discuss, we're more than happy to bring it to you. I think our next
Yes,
chat
please.
on Tuesday is an extension of this. We're actually talking about parenting with another friend of mine, and I think that will also be a very interesting topic. Guys, please leave your
There's there's
feedback.
there's, there's countless topics, countless topics. So
Yeah,
I'm sure we'll
exactly.
have much to discuss.
Yeah. Please give
Thank
us
you
your
so much.
feedback. Think about our page. If there's any topic you'd like us to discuss, if there's any speaker you'd like us to bring. Sorry, Aishu, what was your question? I don't know what you asked. I'm going to quickly
We have another
type
question.
that again, and we'll just wait for you to put that in. And
Okay.
in the meanwhile, I also want to say this, that, and our viewers, if anyone is really battling any addiction of any format, um, you know, it's it's a difficult journey. It's going to be hard. Please be kind on yourself more than anything else. You're always going to have bad days and good days. Uh, you don't have to beat yourself about it, but please make sure you get help, get the right kind of help, because we have one life, and this one life is not worth throwing away for anything really.
Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely. While we're waiting for Aishu's question, Kashyap, yes,
yeah,
it probably is. He asked if there's the constant effort to help someone constantly think of the person's issues as an addiction. Yes, it is an addiction of
yeah,
sorts. He's playing the
yeah,
rescuer in those relationships. And I think it's great to help. It's great to be there for someone, but with
yeah,
boundaries, in a healthy way, in a healthy manner. And you'll know when you've crossed that line, because you'll start
yeah,
feeling depleted mentally,
yeah,
emotionally, energetically. And when you've reached that point, it's time to step back. Time to step back.
yeah. I'd also like to tell you, Kashyap, though I've also seen this pattern in a few people, that this whole cycle of helping people and being over involved in their lives and being there for people too much is also
An escape.
somewhere. Yeah, somewhere you need to rethink, is there something missing in your own life? Is there something that you're not fulfilling, whether it's a relationship, whether it's a work thing, whether it's whatever? Because, when you're over involved in somebody else's life, it's also a need to be there for people, and that's also not very healthy. So
Healthy.
I hope you
It's, it's, it's
understand
kind
that.
of it's kind of a distraction from your own issues in a sense
Yeah.
also.
And
Can be.
question
Can be.
here, simple exercise for self-acceptance or knowing self more. I think that's
Awareness.
more like awareness.
This can actually be a topic all in itself, and Aishu, we will take this up for sure. Unfortunately, there's no magic pill or one exercise. I would recommend becoming aware of your patterns, aware of things that are not working out, aware of your role in them, what kind of people are in your life, what kind of relationships you're having. And
Yeah.
going from lack of self-acceptance to self-acceptance is very hard, because you're again pushed into the unfamiliar. You're pushed into the
Yes.
unfamiliar, and you'll feel very uncomfortable as you start that process.
Lost you there, huh?
And effort you may have to make to get there, but
Dee, I
we will
think I
discuss
lost
this
you
in
for a
another day. No, did you? Am I back? Okay.
wonderful,
So I
wonderful.
said no. It's,
Thank
it's
you.
definitely worth the
Thank
process. Thank you, guys. Thank you all for logging in, Aanchal. Thank you, darling.
you.
I'll see you soon. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure being here.
And I'll see you soon. Thank
Thank you, darling.